Hello. Um, we will probably start in another 2 to 3 minutes. So in another 2 to 3 minutes, we'll probably start. Um, get started. Let's hit the pause recording, stop recording. Oh, it's recording this entire time. Cool. So hi everyone, welcome to this Python course. This is being recorded, so I'm assuming people will see it afterwards. Hopefully it is recording. Um, so yeah, this course will cover the basics of Python and continue on that way. Um, and we will be getting into harder stuff later on. So in this, we will start off with just how to set up stuff so you could start coding in Python and just the basics. So you could make small programs. There is a challenge at the end of today's um, webinar. I don't know exactly if we're going to be able to cover everything, but we shall see. So let me share my desktop. Display one. Okay, cool. We don't really need this. Cool. So as I said, I'm going to first show you what we will be using in order to code in Python, and then later on during the lesson, I'm going to show you the basics of Python, and we will continue on from there. This will be a daily webinar, so we will continue on from the previous section, and maybe we will continue on like that. So first things first, Python is a fairly useful language to know. A lot of employers are looking for it. That being said, in order to get Python on your computer, there are different things you can use. I'll be going over 3 different softwares you can use in order to code in Python, and the advantages and disadvantages of each one. So let's talk about this first one, Python's IDLE. Now, if you just go into Google, just type in Python, enter. Just typing in Python will come up with Python's own website, python.org. And if you hit that and then go into downloads, you could download a version of Python. This is in the order in which they were released, so from most recent to previous. By the way, I do also have the chat up, so if you do send me a message or any questions, I can see them. Yeah, so this is from most recent to later versions. So in order to download Python, just you can look at the release notes, take a look at what's been added, what's been taken away. But for most users, they won't really care. I would advise either downloading this Python 3.8 or Python 3.7. This version of coding is what we will be using in most of our webinars. Later on down the line, we may start using Anaconda. We'll get into Anaconda in a second, but I highly advise you download this IDE for Python. By the way, IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. Python's IDLE just has an extra L, which means learning, so Integrated Development Learning Environment. Yeah, so that being said, I highly advise you either download this version or this version. It doesn't really matter. So if you do hit download, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you have which versions you can download. So obviously, if you're on Windows, you could figure out if yours is a 64-bit or a 32-bit system and download that. If you're on Mac, there's just one. That's pretty straightforward. You could hit that and download it. Other than that, it's fairly straightforward to download. You just keep hitting next and it's downloaded. If we do open this up, what opens up is Python shell. We will get into this in a minute, but once you once you download and open it up, this is what you should see. And if you see this, you've probably downloaded it correctly. That being said, this has its advantages and disadvantages. If you're completely new to Python, this is probably the best tool in order to code in Python for now. Once you get a little bit more advanced, you may want to move over to one of the other two I'll quickly go over. But Python's shell is probably the best option if you're just getting into coding. Now, the second option we'll look at is Visual Studio Code. In order to download it, same thing like last time, just in Google type in Visual Studio Code. Once you find its web, I'm pretty sure this is by Microsoft, so it will automatically say what version are you on. Are you on Windows, Linux, Mac? And you could just hit this, it'll download, and then you could open it. Now, setting up Python on Visual Studio Code is a little bit more complicated. Using Python on Visual Studio Code is a little bit more complicated, but Visual Studio Code has its advantages compared to Python's own IDLE. One advantage of using Visual Studio Code is it will finish off code for you, but I only advise that you use this once you're comfortable with Python, once you're comfortable with Python, and only then go on to Visual Studio Code. So one advantage for Visual Studio Code is it's more professional in the sense, but it's more difficult to run scripts, at least in my opinion. Well, you can feel free to use this, but I still highly advise you use Python's IDLE if you're new. If you program in other languages, you probably already have Visual Studio Code downloaded. In that case, feel free to use it. It's just a little bit more complicated to set up Python on it. But if you do have any problems, a Google search should be good enough to solve any problems you may face. Now, the last thing we will talk about is Anaconda. Now, I'm going to quickly open this up before I show you how you download it. Now, Anaconda is probably what a lot of employers probably use if they are using Python. Anaconda is a collection of Python resources that employers probably look for. With every single one of them has their own users. It does have a version of VS Code on it. Later down the line, if we do end up using any of these, it will probably be Jupyter Notebook. Jupyter Notebook is used for, like, as it says here, it's on. So if you do launch this, it launches up on Google Chrome. Let's see how long this takes. There we go. So it does launch on Google Chrome, and you could do it like this. This does have its own advantages and disadvantages. The main advantage for Jupyter Notebook is for some stuff, statistical stuff. If you're dealing with statistics, graphs, all that type of stuff, Jupyter Notebook is probably what you would want to use. But of course, if you're completely new to Python, none of this is of any relevance. But later down the line, we may use Jupyter Notebook just because it makes some stuff easier. Let's quit out. Yes. In order to download Jupyter or Anaconda, you could just search it up on Google, Anaconda Python. Obviously, Anaconda is also a snake. So just adding Python will lead you to this individual edition. If you hit that, hit download, it'll bring you down to the download section, and you could download the relevant version. I do recommend you download Python version 3 or above, just because that's what we will be using. So even on Python's site, either 3.8 or 3.7, any of those two is fine. There's not many differences between them, or there aren't any differences that would affect us directly. Now, that being said, these are the three IDEs I advise you use one of these three. There are others. Feel free to use any you're comfortable with. But during all our sessions, we will be using the Python's own IDLE. This is great for beginners, and it's just a lot easier to work with right off the bat. So now let's take a tour of what this IDLE actually does and how it works. Now, when you open it, so when you double hit it, double click it, what opens up is Python's shell. It gives you your Python version and it says shell. Now, what this is basically how you interact with other with your user. So the point of programming, or to make programs, is to solve a problem in one way or the other. And every program's designed to take in inputs, process them, and give an output. So this is how your programs, while you're testing them, will interact with users. It will be displayed here. So when you run your programs, they will run over here. And that's that. At this, as you can see, there are 3 lines here. Over here, you can type in code. Let's just type in a really simple code. Hit enter, and it will run that single line of code. So you can test this by running single lines of code, and it will work. But if you want to write a whole chunk of code, then you have to go to File, New File, and this is where you could write a whole series of codes and lines. And then when you run this, it will run over here and display all the information over here. Now, one thing to note is, in order to run a Python script, it does need to be saved. So if you're in this window, you can see run and then run module. When you hit this, if you've made any changes, it will first prompt you to save it, and then it will proceed to actually execute it. So if we do this half and half, this is probably how most of our sessions will look, just half of it in Python and the output. We will also be going over concepts in just computer science in general. So concepts being the concepts of data types in programming and all that. So this is structured like a university level course. So we will start from the basics, and the entire idea of this is so you understand a lot more. So I could show you how to code in a couple lessons, but you probably won't understand any of it. So the point of all of this is to understand what you're doing and understand the concepts in computer science, so which will overall just make you a better programmer. So let's get into just how to start running scripts and just a basic program. So obviously over here is where we will be doing the bulk of our programming, and let's just type in a really simple print statement. I'll explain what this means in a second. Hello world. So let's say this is your code. Codes, note that it does tell you at the bottom what line you're on. So we're on line 2. Obviously line 1 doesn't have anything. We're on line 2. If we hit run module, obviously it asks us to, it must be saved first, hit OK. And then you could find a place to save it. So in documents, I'm just going to create a new folder. And let's just call this lessons. Inside of this, let's give this the name lesson 1, save, and there we go. It ran and it printed out hello world. So as I said earlier, the entire point of a program is to take in inputs, process them, and give you outputs. So take in data, process that data, give outputs. So print in Python is what we use to give out information to the user. So as you can see here, it says hello world. That's because we told it that we want to display, or we want to print hello world. And print will always print to this shell over here. Now, later on, we will be covering object-oriented programming in Python. And once we get to that section, we can start looking at graphical user interfaces using Python libraries. But that is a lesson for a future date. So for now, all our programs will be text-based. and we'll just, yeah, we'll all be text-based, and we'll just be words on the shell. Now, that being said, let's kind of look at what let's kind of look at exactly what we've done here. Now, in Python, in a lot of other programming languages, you probably need to end your line of code with a semicolon. That isn't necessary in Python. Python does have a lot of differences to, let's say, Java or C. That being said, Python is a great language if you're a beginner. It could get you familiar with concepts a lot easier than a lot of other languages, and a lot of other programming languages could also be very overwhelming. Just because in order to do, let's say in Java, in order to do a print statement, you probably need 5 or 6 lines of code. So what Java does in 6 lines, Python does in 1 line. That being said, Python does also have its drawbacks. We'll get into them as we come across them. We'll also be talking about concepts that apply to other languages, which may not technically apply to Python. So print, as I said earlier, just displays information to the user. So whatever you put in within these brackets, it will show the user. So this is what the user sees. So each time you see this line here, after that is your program running, and then once your program finishes, you'll see there's 3 arrows again. So anything between them is what the user kind of sees if they were using your program. So if we gave a program to some user and asked them to run it, all they will see would be hello world. Now, yeah, so print is what we use to give information to our user. Now, what we put inside of print does matter. So for now, just we'll get into this. I don't know if we we'll get into this webinar or in a future webinar, but I will be going through the significance of these quotation marks or speech marks. It is very important that you use these speech marks, but we will get into this in more detail in a future webinar. Now, that being said, it's important to also know what variables are in any programming language in that case. So let's change this from displaying this to a whiteboard. Let's make, so now you should be seeing a whiteboard that I could control. Cool. Now, if you're completely new to programming, variables will kind of be a mystery for you at first, but it does get easier as you use them more and more. So we just want a pencil for now, that's all. Now, how I want you to, if you're completely new to programming, what I want you to do is imagine a variable as a box. So, well, okay, why is that not working properly? Let's try that again. There we go. So I want you to kind of imagine a variable as a box. Why is this not drawing? There we go. Okay, so let's say this is our box. Imagine every variable as just a box. Technically speaking, all a variable is a storage location while a program is running. So, but if you're completely new to programming, I want you to imagine a variable as a box, and a variable has three things associated with it. A name. So with a box, we could label a box. So if this allows me to draw. I don't know why this isn't working. Yeah, no clue why this isn't working. Okay, so three things why. Let's just go to a new whiteboard. Cool. So 3 things associated with variable is a label. So if you have a box here, you can label the box. You can name it. You can name it whatever you want. There are a few exceptions to that, but technically you can name a variable whatever you want. So in any case, we could just call it a variable as it is. Yep, no, it's not going to let me type that easily. Um, I'll just explain it physically in that case. There was an option to, yeah, no, it's not. So yeah, so first thing about a variable which is key is that you can name it. Variables have names and you could choose names for variables, which is really important. Second thing is I want you to imagine a box with like a photocopier and a shredder attached to it. Variables could copy what's in them, what is within them. So these boxes have the ability to just clone whatever is inside them, and they also have the ability to destroy whatever is inside them. So just kind of get that picture into your head. That is what a variable is in most programming languages, and that's no different in Python. This is really annoying that I was working yesterday and now it's not letting me draw anything. So there's our box. We can label it. So I'm just going to do a squiggly line if it allows me. Nope, it's not going to allow me to do anything. Okay, so if I use my mouse, it works. So you can label it, you could call it whatever you want, and it has a photocopier. I'm not even going to attempt to draw a photocopier, but it has a photocopier and a shredder attached to it. So variables are able to clone anything inside them and destroy them, obviously depending on what the programmer asks them to do. So just imagine that, whoops, let's share my screen again. Display one, okay. So that's what, when I say variable, that's what I want you to imagine, a box that is able to clone whatever's in them and destroy whatever is inside of them. Now in Python, let's move that back onto that side. Now in Python, variables, you literally, in order to create a variable, you just type in whatever you want to call it. So let's say we want to call a variable called name that will store someone's name. There we go. You just type in name, and that's your variable created. Now in Python, you just can't. In Python is one of the few languages that I could think of off the top of my head, where you have to create a variable and assign it at the same time. Now let's kind of understand what that means. In other programming languages, let's say Java, you could create a variable, so you could create a box and just have nothing inside of it. Like you could just create a box and just not do anything with it. But in Python, you have to create a box and you have to specify what's going to be inside of that box right off the bat. So you can tell Python none, that there's going to be nothing inside this box to start off with, which is fine, which is kind of the equivalent to other programming languages where you just create a variable, you just create a box. But in Python, you kind of right off the bat have to specify what's going to be inside the box. And another thing, the way Python differentiates between variables, and this is what we call a string. So the way Python differentiates between them is strings have quotation marks around them, and variables are just words in the language. So if we do create a variable name, we have to store something inside of it. So you can't technically store variables within other variables. There is kind of an exception, grammatically speaking, of that where you could store. I just saw the chat. Why we have used equals not in this language. I'll get to that in a second if I understood what you meant correctly. But for now, just know that two quotation marks together like this is a string. And all a string means in any programming language is just a collection of letters. Now, yeah, so variable equals and whatever you want to store inside of it. So in this box, we're just going to store my name, which is Amrit. So inside this box, we are storing this word Amrit, the string Amrit, and mathematically speaking, equals means the same, or yeah, the same. Now in programming, one equal sign means assignment. So this is what I was talking about earlier. In Python, you have to create and assign the variable all at once. So one equal sign means assignment, and all we're saying is we're storing this value inside of here. Now, I would say another way to think about this is in other programming languages, you could just create a variable. So in literally in other programming languages, you could just do that. In Python, you can't, but in other programming languages, you can do that. Just have a name, go to the next line, and give it a value later. But in, whoops, there we go. But in Python, you can't. Now, another way to kind of think about it is, let's say you have a wall of shelves. And on this wall of shelves, you can only put boxes in every individual slot. And these boxes are our theoretical photocopier and shredder boxes that we kind of discussed earlier. So in other programming languages, you could just allocate a shelf to a name and not put a box inside of there. But in Python, in every time you're going to use a shelf, you're going to have to put a box in there, and that box needs to have something within it. Even though your box could have nothing in it, none. In other programming languages, they use the keyword null. Python doesn't use the keyword null. Most keywords in Python start with capital letters. So none is a keyword. And anything in Python which is key, it will change color. So print, as you can see at top, is a pinkish, purplish color. None has changed to an orange color. Strings will change to a green color. And yes, now in Python, another thing to note is variables are, I think, is called dynamic. So you could store whatever you want inside variables. You don't have to specify a specific type. We will get into this later if we have time. But there are data types in programming languages, and you need to be comfortable in using them. If anything, we may cover the basics of it by the end of today. And tomorrow's webinar, we'll go more into data types and how you can play around with them in Python. But in other programming languages, you have to specify what type variables will be. So if you specify that name is going to be an int, actually let's just say string. String. So in other programming languages, if you do this, that means you create a variable name of type string, and you can only store strings within this name. But in Python, variables could have whatever you want inside them whenever you want, which makes programming slightly easier when you're first getting started, but it makes your programs just that much easier to kind of break. So there is its plus side and it has its downside. Now, as I said, one equal sign is assignment, and like 5 seconds ago, I did mention int. Int or integers is just programmer talk for numbers. So let's say 10. When it comes to numbers, you could just type them in, and Python will treat them as numbers. You don't need quotation marks or anything. You could just type in numbers, and Python will treat it as that number. So if we were to go on and print this number, name, let's run it. Run module. As it said, it must be saved. Just hit OK and it saves. Then it prints hello world, because obviously that's what our first line is, and then it prints the number we had over here. So a few things to note here. You can print variables, and variables will just print whatever is inside of them. It's good programming practice to only print strings. Now, this applies to other languages specifically. So let's take Java as an example. Java, you can only print out strings. So you can only print out values that have these quotation marks around them. Python does allow you to give you the flexibility to print out numbers and not constantly having to change them to strings in order to print them. But yeah, so Python does give you that flexibility, but it's good programmer practice to always print out strings. It just makes your program less likely to break at whatever point. But for simple programs like this, Python doesn't mind. Later on, if we do ever get errors, I'll teach you how to break down errors. But for now, let's just wrap our heads around variables. So numbers are perfectly fine without having to have any quotation marks, anything around them. But if you want to store entire sentences, let's say the quick brown fox jumped, I forget the rest. So there was a sentence that uses every letter in the English alphabet. That's all I could remember of it. The quick brown fox jumped over something. So let's say this is an entire sentence. Let's just end it with a full stop. And if we were to run this now, okay, there we go. So the quick brown fox jumped. So this is just one way on how we are gonna in future lessons process the information and display them in one way or the other to the user. So the quick brown fox jumped. Obviously, that's what was stored within our variable, and that's what Python printed out. The quick brown fox jumped. Now, I do have an exercise. It's 33 parts. Cool. Let me open this up. Now, on your screen now, you should see a beginner exercise to see if you could do in Python. This is an excellent segue to my next point. In programming, a lot of the times, if you're ever stuck, one Google search is all you need in order to fix your problem. So let's say you're stuck with this challenge. So by the way, this is a challenge. So kind of take a screenshot, take a picture of it really quickly. I'll leave it on the screen for a couple more seconds. I will probably go over it next lesson. At the start of the next webinar, just quickly go over how I did it. So at the end of every major milestone, I will be giving you some sort of challenge. So this is a really straightforward challenge, just using this print function. If you want to get fancy, you can start using variables and try making it a little bit more efficient of a program. But that's completely up to you. This is all up to you. The only way you're going to get better at programming is by practicing. And practicing without someone there teaching you how to do it. So the only way you're going to get better is by creating programs and making them better. So try making this program. So all this program is you want to create a program that uses these print statements that when you run it, whoops, let's bring this back up. When you run it, so when you so over here, when you run it, you should see your initials in blocks like this, made up of your whatever your initial is. So for me, it would be AS. So you want to see an A like that, and then an S like that, made up of A's and S's. So give this a go. This is just a really basic program. And a challenge, if you want a challenge, is this program, you are able to do this program in just one line. So technically speaking, if you had this all as print statements, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There'll be 11 lines of code, not including any spaces. It is possible to do this program in just one line. So if you want to push yourself, we will be kind of covering next lesson on how you would do this in one line. And the reason we'll be covering that is it's just string kind of manipulation in Python. But yes, it is possible to do this in one line. And yeah, that is your challenge for today. Your next challenge will probably be in 2 or 3 webinars. Probably not in tomorrow's webinar. Tomorrow's webinar will be going over data types in pretty much all programming languages, a deeper understanding of them, and why data types are the way they are in programming languages. So the big thing of this course is for you to understand why we do things the way we do them. So yeah, so far we've learned how to give information to the user by the statement print, and in 2 or 3, so this is your final chance to take a picture or a screenshot of this. This is being recorded, I believe. Yes, it is being recorded. So do take a quick picture of this. I'm not entirely sure where this will be available after it's recorded, but keep an eye out on Facebook. We will be letting you know where all of these videos will be stored. So you can take a look back at it, but quickly take a picture, a couple more seconds, and then we will kind of move on to what I want to say next. Cool. So that should be enough time. Let's kind of close that. Cool. Yeah, so just a kind of brief overview of what is to come. This is based on like university, how universities go through programming languages and teach programming languages. This is roughly based on that. So each lesson will be building on our understanding of programming languages and Python in general, to the point where you should be comfortable enough to create programs in Python. Do keep in mind they will be text-based programs, so there will be no buttons or animations, nothing too fancy, just text-based. Just get comfortable with programming in Python, and then eventually we'll move to object-oriented programming, which is further down. I'm not entirely sure yet what webinar, but Python, you are able to use objects or object-oriented programming, but we will cover that in the in the future. Anything else? So yeah, do give the challenge a go. Tomorrow's webinar link is going into the chat now. So let me just copy, paste, send. So so just copy paste that link somewhere. The link will also be going up on Facebook. So keep an eye out on SB Components' Facebook. Tomorrow's link will be up soon. And tomorrow we'll be going over data types, so which is strings, ints, boolean, floats, doubles, and off the top of my head, that's all I can remember. We will be going over that, how they work in Python, how they work in other programming languages, so you could apply your understanding of computer science to other languages if you need to. And yeah, so tomorrow's webinar, we'll be going over those concepts. And in tomorrow's webinar, I would also be giving you 2 solutions to the challenge I showed you. One solution being just how to do it generally, another solution being how to do it in one line. And that will then be a great segue on string manipulation, which we will then cover in during tomorrow's webinar. If you have any questions, I'm going to stay. You could type them into chat now. I could quickly answer anything. I did see a question why we have used equals, not the quotation mark symbol in this language. We use equals in most languages just as a form of assignment. Later on down the line, we will look at if statements. Then we use other methods to compare values. So one equal sign in most languages off the top of my head, so in Python, JavaScript, Java, most languages use PHP, most languages use one equal sign as a form of assignment. You're putting some value, you're putting some value into a variable, so into that box. One equal sign is assignment, 2 equal signs will then be comparison, and some programming languages do have other functionality with 3 equal signs. We'll get into that tomorrow, difference between 1 equal sign, and then this will be something different, and this would be something different. We'll get into that in tomorrow's webinar if we have time. We're pretty much out of time for today, so if you have any questions, do put them in the chat now. Yeah, so this was just a quick overview of Python, yeah, just how to print out statements, how to how to use variables, the idea of variables, and how to print them. That being said, I'll quickly show you an error. Print name plus is my, I'm just going to say age. So I'm going to quickly change this from name to age, age. Cool. So this is going to give us an error. Okay. So as you can see in Python, all errors are in red. I'll go over tomorrow's lesson how to fix this error. But if you want extra kind of like tasks, just take a screenshot or whatever of this error and try to figure out how to fix it. The best in programming, 80% of programming probably, is just going to Google and typing in whatever problem you got. Now this doesn't mean just going into Python. not this one, this one. This doesn't mean going into Python and just copy pasting your problem. Most of the time that may work, so copy, and then just going into here, pasting it. Most of the time this will probably work like right off the bat, Stack Overflow. There we go, there's your problem. And then over here, there's your solution. I don't know if this is, no, this is more of a complex thing. Yeah, so this is more complex, but in 99% of the time, just typing in roughly what your problem is, not copy pasting, just actually typing it in and what programming language you're using will give you your answer for any errors you're stuck on in programming. A lot of programs I've built, God knows how many times I've had to go into Google, type in my problem, and then a solution has come up. So in programming, if you run into an error, someone else has probably faced the error before and has asked questions about it online. So actively going onto Google, searching it up, finding out solutions is how you're going to become better at programming and just learn a lot quicker by actively going and exposing yourself to how to do programming just by Googling it. If I could tell you how to fix this program right now, chances of you remembering it are slim to none. So rather than spoon feeding, go out, actively try to fix this program. So that's 2 tasks. I'm not going to say any of them are like compulsory, but what I would recommend is you highly do the print challenge. I accidentally closed it. Let's quickly open it back up. There we go. So I'm going to leave this, I'm going to end this webinar in another minute or so. I don't see any more questions in the chat. So actively try to solve this problem by tomorrow's session. If not, feel free to do it in your own time. The only way you're going to get better at programming is by practice, and this is a great program to start off. Once you've completed this program, push yourself, try to do it in 1 line. You're going to 100% have to Google how to do that. But don't worry if you don't get it. We will be going over it in tomorrow's session. The link for tomorrow's session is in the chat right now. So copy paste it somewhere so you could refer to it tomorrow. Same time, 1 o'clock. There will also be a Facebook post with the link to tomorrow's session. Tomorrow's session is a very important session. So today was just to set up Python, show you what options you have in order to code in Python. Let's close this. We don't need this anymore. So we went over the 3 main things I would probably advise you to use in order from what I highly advise to, yeah, I guess you could use. So that's what we covered in today's session. We covered print and variables, the idea of variables. So remember, imagine a variable as a box. You could put a label on the box, so you could call it whatever you want. And the box has kind of like a photocopier and a shredder attached to it. So the photocopier could copy whatever is inside the box and give it to you, and the shredder could just destroy whatever is inside the box. So tomorrow's session is very important concept-wise. Later on, you would definitely struggle if you don't fully understand the concepts for tomorrow. And in tomorrow's session, I'll also be giving you the link for the day after session. So this is a daily webinar just for you to get Python up and running and start learning Python and creating code. And knowing Python is a great thing to put on your CV. So thank you everyone for watching. That's pretty much everything for today. I don't see any questions in the chat, so I'm going to be ending it here. Please tune in into tomorrow's webinar. It's going to be a very important webinar, concept-wise, just so you understand how languages work and how to play around with variables and manipulate the data within them. So thank you everyone for watching. So in tomorrow's session, if you do have any questions about what we covered today, I could quickly go over it in tomorrow's session. So if you do have any questions, just tune in into tomorrow's session and feel free to ask questions there. And other than that, thank you everyone for watching, and I will see you in tomorrow's session. Bye-bye.